Virtually every leader in the health freedom movement talks about the insecurity of the food supply as one of the primary avenues of tyranny. Our family has rigorously sourced our foods for over a decade, and one of our favorite sources is Farm Match. And specifically, if you are in San Diego, Real Food Club PMA. My kids are literally made from their maple breakfast sausage and the amazing carnitas we make from their pasture-raised pork. But from regeneratively raised raw dairy products to the organic potato chips made in regenerative lard, or anything you might get at your local farmer's market, our family's overall wellness and the security of our food lies in the hands of Farm Match and Real Food Club. I am so excited to be sharing about Farm Match and Real Food Club to offer Future Generations podcast listeners 10% off your first order. You can find the code and link in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of the show. Love and appreciate you all. The desire to go off-grid and disconnect from the system was one of the single most important initiatives any household could have. Whether it is growing our own food, becoming sovereign in our energy production and usage, establishing alternative communication strategies, or digging a well and finding the infinity of primary water. About a year and a half ago, our family moved into our new home in North County, San Diego on 3 acres of precious land here in America's finest county. One of the first things we did was hire Food Forest Abundance to design a regenerative layout for our land. From the different trees to plant differing berry guilds and synergistic pollinators, to consulting on alternative energy, collecting our rainwater, and even helping us find our local well guy, Food Forest Abundance and their Freedom Farm Academy has been pivotal in the gradual and consistent evolution of our household towards true sovereignty from the system. They have helped us simplify a very confusing process and helped us create the design of our dreams. It doesn't matter if you have 3 acres, dozens or hundreds, or just a small yard. Food Forest Abundance has something to offer you and your family in your journey to move your entire household off-grid. Use the code TheFutureGen to work with the absolute best in the world, Food Forest Abundance, to create your own freedom farm and get off-grid at a discounted rate. Welcome to another episode of the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom. This episode with Dr. Joel Warsh, Dr. Joel Gator on Instagram, somebody I have been following for many months, maybe years now. A breath of fresh air in terms of integrative pediatricians, extraordinarily intellectual, very smart, very funny, and at the same time answered the question that I get virtually every day, which is, how do you find a good pediatrician? And I'll usually follow it up with, why do you think you need one? And most parents are like, aren't I supposed to have one? And in the end, when it comes to conventionally trained pediatricians that only push pharma, the answer for most families, they know they don't need that. They know they don't need that. They just don't know not to look for that. And Dr. Joel shared with me his distinctions of what makes a great pediatrician, what makes a great doctor. We talked about many of the basics and the foundations, but we talked about some of the different things that every family should expect and have as a standard. You know, medicine's going to push standard of care. I think families should push their own family standards for what they expect for the doctors, right? Air quotes, which means teachers in their in their children's lives. And Dr. Joel is a model of one who I believe is very inspiring, who's unafraid to tell the truth, who does it in a way that keeps him from getting as censored as we have. But at the same time, at the depth of who he is, he just cares deeply about the truth. He cares deeply about the fact that adult onset diabetes, something I learned from him, significant sugar dysregulation, blood sugar dysregulation. The average age of, quote, type 2 diabetes, adult onset diabetes is what? 13. The youngest ever is 3. Why is that important? It is an adult, quote, an adult disease that is now on average onsetting at teenage years. Alarming. If that doesn't alarm you, I promise you, you are not paying attention to what is absolutely necessary to carry our kids through this dramatic transformation that we are all embarking upon. Dr. Joel is a breath of fresh air. He's a wealth of wisdom. And I honestly enjoyed this episode in a very, very deep way. And I cannot wait to see how this benefits you and your family with the perspectives and the wisdom. And please share it far and wide. Love and appreciate you all. Welcome to the Future Generations podcast, providing you with the world-changing content necessary to inspire you, your family, and our planet to a life of optimal health potential. We'll help you make the choices that powerfully influence the lives you bring into this world. It's time to strengthen our resolve, do better now, and for our future generations. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom. Okay, welcome to another episode of the Future Generations podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Stanton Hom, and this episode is really, really special. I appreciate Dr. Joel. Actually, how should I call you? Dr. Joel Gator or Dr. Joel Warsh?
Either one is fine. I've been called a lot worse for sure, but Joel my name's Joel Warsh, but people have been calling me Dr. Gator because my wife's last name's Intelligator. So either one.
Ooh, that's awesome. I was connected with you sometime during the craziness of the whole lockdown and COVID fiasco, and it was one of those breaths of fresh airs that we just don't find today. We don't find pediatricians who have critical thinking. We don't find pediatricians that are willing to talk about the things that they critically think about. We don't find pediatricians that don't, which some of my patients define good pediatrician as one that's not going to shame, coerce, manipulate, and, force medical products on you. But it was one of those platforms that immediately, sometimes it's just you holding a whiteboard that says something so grounded and normal that you're like, wait, that's a pediatrician. That's awesome. But why don't all of them do that? So Dr. Joel, I'm very grateful for your time. I'd love to welcome you to the podcast. I'd love our audience to get to know you both personally and professionally.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me on and thanks for everything that you do. So yeah, I guess going back a little bit about me. So I grew up in Toronto, ended up becoming a pediatrician, moved to Los Angeles, started working here in, regular program. I did all the regular medical training, great, hospital that I worked at, but I got really frustrated with the regular system and the super short visits, medications for everything, and kind of one way, that we're doing everything. And so that's what led me to start learning about integrative medicine and natural medicine. I'm not against Western medicine at all. I just think there's a time and a place, and looking at where we're going with our health, we're not going in the best direction. And right. So there are all sorts of other holistic modalities and other things out there that I feel like we should combine with Western medicine to help for the benefit of our patients. And so that's what I do in my practice. And with that, I started to see how much people really liked it and enjoyed it. And so that's what led me to start social media and kind of talking about some of this stuff. And that's picked up pretty well. And that's what led me to write a book now, Parenting at Your Child's Pace, because I really wanted to speak about all the main things that I get asked about, but dive into a little bit more depth, given you can only get into so much on social media, and talk about the different perspectives. And just like you said, one of the big things that's really frustrating to me as a pediatrician and as a parent, and just somebody who's watching what's going on out there in medicine, is it seems like medicine is moving towards telling you what to do instead of working with you. Like medicine, like the word doctor is from docere, meaning to teach in Latin. And that's what it used to be. But now it seems like it's telling people what to do, which is really not the way that it's supposed to be. You're supposed to have a conversation, inform people of the different options, and then help them to make the best decision that's right for them. It might not always be the same thing that you would do for yourself, but really have a discussion to help people make decisions. And a lot of times it's probably going to be what you think. I mean, hopefully you're with a doctor who you trust, and if they give you advice, you're going to take it, but that's not the way that it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be, you're having a conversation, you inform people of the information, you help them to make a decision, and then they make whatever decision's best for them. So yeah, that is a little bit frustrating in medicine, but that's what got me here today.
I love that. And it's I'm a little humble to say that I didn't know you had a book, and I'm looking at it now, and it's something that I'm going to order right away, because it's one of those things that we hear every single day. every single day. Do you know any good pediatricians? And it's something that I balk at, and I balk at not because if doctor and healthcare has become this, like coercive entity, then I pause. I pause because I'm like, I don't know if that even has space in healthcare. I think those are contradictory terms. And I think doctor, like you said, I just had a whole conversation with a layperson who I kept calling doc because he's a teacher, but because he takes that not authoritarian view, but he takes like this, I want to teach you something that potentially, and there's this humility behind it. And I love that. I'm curious if you could define like what a good pediatrician is, because I think it's really important for it to come from, somebody who's actually in the field.
Yeah. And I would say this, I think we have to take a step back and look at doctors and especially pediatricians, right? And it's like, I never bash pediatricians. I never say anything bad about doctors or pediatricians in general, because it's like, these are not bad people, right? It's not like somebody goes into medicine and they're trying to harm kids. I'm like, these are people that went into healthcare to help kids. So these are individuals with, for sure, the best of intentions, good people in general, but everybody has a different opinion, I think, of how to get to a place of health. And I think that the medical system has just broken down so much. And the way that most people have to practice medicine is not even what they got into it in the first place. So I think that, when you're talking about a pediatrician, what makes a good pediatrician, that's a very individual choice. I think you need to know what you are looking for in a pediatrician, and then that can help guide you to find the right one for you. The first step with all this is figuring out in the first place that you have choice, right? We no matter what insurance model you have, no matter where you are in the world, you have some choice. You don't have to go with the first person that you're exposed to. And you do need to feel empowered that if it's not the best fit for your family, then you can change to a different practitioner for whatever reason that is. And you can ask questions if you're having a new baby and you want to, pick your pediatrician. You can often have an interview with them, ask questions, figure out what are those important values for you, because the important values for you might be very different than somebody else. For me, as an integrative practitioner, right, somebody who's going to be probably a good fit for my practice is generally going to be someone who's holistic minded, open to more things. I mean, we have people that are on both sides of the spectrum. So I'm not, I'm in the middle, so people can be on both sides. But I think that if you're somebody who's very hardcore medicine and you want somebody who's going to quote you the studies for everything, then there's doctors like that. If you want somebody who's more holistic minded, then you have to ask questions to pick out somebody who's going to be more like that, because you don't want to go in and then give your opinion and then kind of feel shamed or like feel dismissed. You want to have a conversation, and you're only going to get there by identifying some of those key values and then asking questions and finding somebody that's as close a fit as possible that you can find in your area. And it depends where you live. If you're in a big city, if you're in like New York or something, there's 1,000 doctors. You can find one that you like. If you're in the middle of nowhere, well, you might only have 3 options. You go with the best one that is closest fit, I think.
And when you, because I would say the majority of our listeners are largely, we started the podcast during the first year of COVID. And so I would say, and we became very well known just to speak about the things that a lot of people were thinking about, but no one could say because you'd get censored and you get deplatformed, there's cancel culture and all those types of things. What would you say to those types of parents who already have this kind of understanding of, it's not just my choice, it's that there are particular choices that we're looking for, and it seems to be like a needle in a haystack in finding a pediatrician that aligns with that type of philosophy or that type of
it's not the easiest. Certainly if you're thinking about wanting to do certain medical procedures versus not, then you have to find someone that's open to that. There are a lot of, if we're talking about vaccines in general, right, I think that's usually what people are wanting to talk about. Then
of course,
that's there are some practitioners that want to go with the regular schedule. And if you are not that type of person, then that's not going to be a doctor for you. There are some people that want to go on slower schedules and some people that don't want to do it. And I think you have to ask the questions if that's where you're going to be, to make a decision, find somebody that's open to at least having the discussion around whatever your comfort level is, and then being open to answering your questions about pros and cons of whatever medical procedure, medication you're going to do, because everything has risks, everything has side effects, and everything has, most things have benefits, right? So it's you have to weigh those for yourself, and you have to find someone you can have a discussion with. And it exists. I mean, even for people that are more holistic minded, there are holistic doctors. Maybe you have to travel a little farther. Maybe you don't go to them all the time. You find two different practitioners. Maybe you find a regular practitioner and have a naturopathic doctor. There are a lot of options in terms of having a team where you can do both. So I think it depends on your situation, where you are, and then also the financial resources, because a lot of integrative practitioners do longer visits, so they can't necessarily take insurance or have some sort of hybrid model, and that doesn't work for everybody.
How'd you come to practice the way that you do? Was there any particular inspiration, any particular catalyst?
So I would say for integrative medicine, based on what I have seen, I feel like most people get into integrative medicine because they have some sort of life-altering health complication that doesn't get resolved in modern medicine. Then they go to an integrative practitioner, they get better, and they're like, oh. And that wasn't really for me. I'm thankfully, knock on wood, been pretty healthy. But I did go through training and had seen individuals go outside of the system and get better, had friends, other people that I know that have gone outside the system. And it just started making me think, like, why is this person going to this practitioner and getting better? Like, what am I missing? What have I not been taught? Like, what's going on here? Plus, I met my now wife at that time, and she's also very holistic minded as well. So I think all of those things together and have kept the ball rolling, for integrative medicine. But it's just, once you get outside the system and you start learning about it even just a little bit, then nobody really goes like, oh wow, this is crazy. They're like, what? Why didn't we get taught this stuff? Why aren't we thinking like this? Like, why don't we think about why? So often it's, there are woo-woo things in alternative medicine if you want to get way out there, but most of it is not that. It's just thinking critically, asking questions, thinking about prevention, thinking about basic human stuff like diet, exercise, sleep. That none of that's very crazy. It's just we aren't trained in that model in medicine. We're trained in the pharmaceutical model, and that's just what we know.
Yeah. What would you say, from a integrative pediatrician's perspective, are some of the biggest challenges we face today?
I think some of the biggest challenges we face, especially for kids, would be chronic disease.
Yeah.
I think that modern medicine was really built up around infectious disease, right? We were dying when we were 40 people. we're not living that long. So we're much better at that, right? We're you can't just say that everything in medicine is bad. There's obviously a lot of good to it as well. We're living a lot longer. We're much better at fighting off disease. We have medicines that we never had before that can save your life, and all sorts of procedures and surgeries and things like that. All that stuff can be good if you need it. We have sanitation, all sorts of stuff that we've learned. So that part is good. But with all of that has come a rise in chronic disease, and that's continued to increase over the last several decades, from very minimal of an issue to huge issue in kids. Like 50% of kids have a chronic disease now, and life expectancy is going down for the first time. And so we have to take a look at that. I think at this point, take a step back and say, okay, we do some things better, but obviously there's some new issues that are not being treated, or we're not doing a good job of that in modern medicine. And so, we need to course correct. What are the things that we need to do to move back into a better direction so our kids can be healthier? And I don't see that happening at this point. I feel like it's getting worse and worse, and we're not really addressing any of the root causes. We're not in any great depth spending time on prevention and basics, and we're really just kind of marketed to by corporations at this point, and we're not really pushing back. Or not very pushing back very much. We're just kind of watching this happen and saying, oh, it's just genetics. I guess it's just the way it is, which is not the case.
I think most of our listeners are starting to recognize the maybe myopic nature of, like, genes are determinant of everything. And it's a model, right? It's a model that unfortunately it's like, okay, if you don't have a choice, then here, take this drug, right? Like there's really no other option.
But we're seeing a lot of that, right? I think especially when it comes to parenting, there's this movement towards blaming genetics and saying that it's just that way, because that takes the responsibility away from
Wow.
parents, takes responsibility away from society and the stuff that we're doing, because it's like it's shaming or it's blaming, which is not the case. Like,
Hmm.
I get called all sorts of things when we talk about this kind of stuff, but it's like, as a doctor, as a health advocate, as a parent, like, what is our job? Our job is to speak out against the things that are causing issues, that are very obviously causing issues. And it's not shaming or blaming a parent to say that there are things that we are doing that are causing or contributing to a lot of this disease burden, and there are things that we can do to make it better. We need to learn about these things. We need to identify what's going on, so that way we can move in a different direction. If we don't know something, then we need to learn it, so that way we can make changes. But stepping back and saying that there's nothing that we can do, that doesn't help anything. And there's no way that these diseases are genetic. I mean, there's obviously a component of almost everything that is genetic, right? There are certain diseases that are absolutely genetic, and there's not much that you can do. You can get cystic fibrosis and have the genes, and there's not much you can do. But when you look at most of these conditions and diseases where they basically weren't existing in kids 20, 50 years ago, and now they're extremely prevalent, we can talk
Hmm.
about autism rates, and like we're looking at 1 in 10,000, 1 in 250, 1 in 150, 1 in 40, 1 in 36, 1 in 22 in California. Like, that's over a few decades. That's not because we're better at diagnosis. It's not because of genetics. That's because it's happening more. Yes, some of it is the other stuff, of course, but like, that's not the case. And if people want to fight back, and like that's insane to me. Like, it's obviously happening a lot more. We all know that if you're watching it, out there and you're looking around at kids. Diabetes. I mean, type 2 is called adult onset diabetes. Like, it wasn't even in kids. I did a whole talk on diabetes before, and I was trying to look into, like, okay, well, what are the statistics from before to then? And I couldn't even find data anywhere that I looked, really, from over 50 years ago or 100 years ago
Wow.
on this, because it didn't exist in kids, but the average age is 13. For onset now, a third of kids have diabetes or prediabetes. Like, that's not because of genetics. That's because of what we're doing.
The you mentioned I didn't know that. 13. I did not know that. I remember reading some research, throughout my postgrad just about, yeah, as young as 5, and now I'm reading as young as 3, and you're like, that is crazy. But the average age for type 2 diabetes at all onset is 13 years old now.
Mhm.
So it's a childhood disease.
The childhood disease. And that it wasn't. It's not even named that. But it is.
It's gnarly.
So
That is gnarly.
it is, and that's what I'm saying. It's like, that's such a huge red flag. That's so horrible, and yet it's like, it's just normal. Like, that's just happening, and I think that diabetes maybe is the best example that we can really help to move things in a better direction, because people definitely get that there's different kinds of diabetes, right? And there's a more genetic component, and there's a more lifestyle component, and especially for type 2 diabetes of anything, if you improve your lifestyle in terms of eating healthier, exercising more, then a large portion of individuals who get the diagnosis can remove that diagnosis. I think that's true of almost every other condition, whether you want to call it autism or autoimmune conditions. There's absolutely genetic components, and some people that you could do everything under the sun and they're still going to have issues. But for the vast majority, it's lifestyle. And I
Yeah.
think that it's expressed in different ways for different individuals. But if we start to clean up the lifestyle, we'll see it improve. And integrative practitioners do. You do see kids lose their diagnoses of all sorts of things if they change their lifestyle, but it's not instantaneous. It takes a few years, but
Yeah.
it does happen.
I'm curious, you mentioned the word root cause, or the phrase root cause, earlier. And I'm curious, through your lens, what are some of the biggest root causes that you see today?
Yeah. So, well, I would say, really just getting back to the foundations of health. So I call it the seeds of health. And
Mm.
that's a big part of my first chapter of the book, because again, one of the reasons why I wanted to write it was to get to parents before, and to say, okay, there's all this important parenting stuff that we want to know, but nothing happens without having good health. So let's start with the foundation. So I call it the Dr. Gator smoothie, mostly just to make fun of the smoothies that, the air quotes gurus always go on the talk shows and like, oh, take this smoothie and it'll cure everything, which there's no such thing, right? If you want it to be healthy, then it involves lots of different things that we need to do. So I say, start with a big scoop of the seeds, meaning stress, environment and toxins, exercise, diet, and sleep. and then, throw in there the other stuff that is very important, like getting out in nature, getting your vitamin D, family, community, love, all of these things that really build a healthy foundation for you. So that to me that's what the bedrock of our health is. And
Yeah.
I really have to focus down. It's food and toxins that are the two big ones.
That's awesome. It's not a mystery today, and I was in the military. I got out in 2005, and I remember just learning. Dr. Mercola is one of the first books that I read, Total Health. I read it in 2003 in Iraq, and I was just learning so much. And I would look at his book, and then I would look at some of the food we're eating in the military, and I was like, that's the food industry. It's like, oh, this is part of the pyramid, but it's like full of toxins. Like, this is crazy. Like, and it's the first time that I ever read like a label. And I think that's a huge root cause that I really appreciate you sharing. What would you say are, from a toxicity level, are the biggest focuses that you think move the needle most in the families in your practice?
So you actually said it right there. I think it's reading labels, right? That's if people ask me what's the one thing that I would change or one thing that I would have people do, it's from now on, for every single thing that you purchase, whether it's food or a product of any kind, read the labels, start to become an active consumer, and just start to understand what you're purchasing and try to make better, more informed decisions. You don't need a PhD in chemistry. You don't need to know what every ingredient on every label is. But if it's a big word that you don't know what it is, it's probably not good for you. So just don't get that thing. Buy the thing with real words, and you're going to be, a long way forward when you're buying food. And after that, once you get started, then okay, you can start learning about some things. You can Google, I saw this ingredient. What is that? What does that cause issues? You can learn, and you will learn over time if you become interested in it. But again, you don't need to know very much. You just look at the label, and you can buy a bag of chips. And if you're buying that bag of chips, well, get the two different ones that are right beside each other. Look at the two labels and buy the better one. And it doesn't mean you have to go to broccoli tomorrow for your kids for everything. But at least if we're making better decisions each time, then it adds up. And I really think that it makes a huge difference to be mindful of all of these things, because every little bit counts. And if you eat a piece of cake, that's not the end of the world. Like, I'm not 100% all or none. Kids will be kids, they'll do whatever. But it matters if you're eating that cake every single day versus the one time at the party. It really does make a difference. And there's a great study out of Harvard I like to quote that I really love, that they took a bunch of patients, and they were giving them 5 days of canned soup and then 5 days of homemade soup. And they were looking at the urine BPA levels. And in cans of soup, there's BPA in the lining. So that's where you're going to get your extra BPA from. And so they gave them those soup for 5 days for the can. Then they gave them 5 days with homemade soup, and they looked at their urine levels before and after. And the difference was 1,000%.
Wow.
In BPA levels in the urine. And to me, I love that example, because it's like,
Wow.
5 days, can of soup, look at the difference in just one chemical in your urine. And yes, we can detoxify, and that's great. And it was coming out. But the point is, what about everything that we're doing? All the different chemicals, all the things we're exposed to. If you don't think it matters, it does. If you give that kid that can of soup for the next 10 years, well, your body's probably not going to be able to handle all that BPA. So at some point, it's going to cause an issue. So that's what I think is happening.
So many people have asked me what I do to stay mentally and physically resilient in the midst of the unending polarization, fear, and tyranny. Literally nothing has made a bigger impact for me than daily cold plunging. 3 minutes, 37 degrees every morning for over a year now. My friends, I wanted to tell you about the Edge Tub from Edge Theory Labs. Their portable and inflatable tub can alternate between an ice bath and hot tub. I've been regenerating the benefits of cold plunging every day, like better sleep, better focus, and more energy. We have had some really amazing interviews to learn more about cold exposure. But in the meantime, I invite you to check out Edge Theory Labs' website to learn more. I'm also happy to share an exclusive offer for Future Generations podcast listeners, $150 off using the code TheFutureGen. You can find more info in the show notes. Get cold. What's up, FG fam? One of the single best companies whose products have supported the optimal wellness of our family for years is Earthly Wellness. Kate TG and her team have stood for truth, health, and freedom in ways that paved the way for so many of us. They experienced heavy levels of censorship long before it was popularized, and they stood strong and persevered. Their products are clean, cost-effective, and honestly, they work for all ages. From supporting my wife, our oldest, and our little guy, Earthly Wellness provides products that have been foundational for our family for years. We especially use their products right before bedtime. Their Feel Better Fast and other herbal tinctures are some of the best in the world, as well as their amazing Goodnight Lotion, the magnesium oil, are mainstays. I am so excited to be partnering with Earthly to offer future generations podcast listeners 10% off your first purchase. You can find the code link in the show notes. Enjoy the rest of the show. Love and appreciate you all. I was interviewing another layperson, not a doctor, but he's an expert on toxicity. And he just said, he was like, you know, there are 88,000 chemicals in the world. 2,300 have been studied to be generally regarded as safe. And none of them have been studied in concert. None of them have been studied in combination. And so like you couldn't stress that enough, right? Like in something as simple as BPA, but ubiquitous as BPA, like your receipts at the stores have BPA in them. And like the hormone dysregulation and the way that it actually targets such central pathways of the body is pretty remarkable. So I appreciate you sharing that. Dr. Joel, could you verbalize like what you find like your purpose and like your mission, the why behind what you do is?
I think right now my big why is just to wake people up a little bit, make them inform them, try to spread a message of health that's not divisive, somewhat in the middle, and try to give a balanced approach. I think when I see what's going on online in social media, especially with health, it's very one-sided on one side or the other. It's very divisive.
Yeah.
Almost every topic is so, I don't know, frustrating for parents, so stressful. Like every decision you make feels like you're going to kill your child, or you're doing the wrong thing, or whatever it is. And basically on every topic, it's somewhere in the middle. Most things, it doesn't really matter that much, which one you do. And most things you can kind of take the information on both sides, or take in information about multiple different avenues of approaching that question or topic, and then choose what's best for you. And I mean, that's kind of how I built the book in general, was like, that's really what I wanted to do, is bring some of these bigger topics together, potty training, sleep training, feeding your kid, all these things that we have to deal with as a parent. But when you go online right now, it's like one person is the air quotes guru. They tell you their way. It's the only way. If you don't do this, your kid's going to have this problem. Mm-hmm. And parents are so stressed out about these things that it's like, does it really matter? Just whichever one. So I think it's just helping to get that information out there, that it's not so stressful to be a parent, and we can do this, and really bring in that balanced health and wellness approach, and also just make people aware that like our health is bad and we're going in a bad direction. And it's really bad. It's much worse than people think. And I think that's very concerning, because it's being dismissed. It's not being addressed.
I'm curious, maybe more pragmatically, because our kids are very similar ages. What would you say as a dad that you have navigated from a health perspective that you find, because you have to have a reason behind your book. I'm sure it's very clinical. I'm sure it's very much of your own professional experience, but maybe pragmatically, how have you found navigating healthcare as dad?
I think being a pediatrician helps you to be a dad, and vice versa. I think they work in tandem. I think it's, I make the joke even at the beginning of the book, where people always like, oh yeah, it must be so great to be a pediatrician, to be a dad. That's so good. Like, and no, that's not true. I mean, obviously there's like a little benefit to being a doctor. You're maybe not worried about some of the little things, but being a parent has nothing to do with being a doctor. It's very minimal. Very minimally should you be in contact with healthcare, unless you really have some sort of major, health crisis that you need to be dealing with. So parenting is different. Parenting is just being there and kind of figuring things out as you go, and figuring out your own child and what works best for them. And so I think that they've kind of informed each other, and also, maybe helped me be a little better doctor, because you get a little bit better empathy, I think, of going through and seeing your own kids go through things, and understanding the fears that parents have that you can only have if you have a kid. But yeah, I think that it's as a pediatrician, I think it's very helpful to have your own kids kind of see things through a parenting lens. But yeah, I think they kind of inform each other, but they're still pretty different.
How long did you practice before you had kids?
Um, Maybe, like, again, this kind of depends on when you consider beginning of practice, but I would say like 5 to 10 years.
Gotcha.
Yeah.
How would you say your practice or how you changed as a doctor since being a dad?
I think just a little bit more empathetic, a little bit more
Oh, cool.
understanding of what parents go through, and a little bit better understanding of the stresses, and also just going through it, and seeing that there's all this parenting stuff kind of out there, seeing it through my friends, and like looking at the lens of what they're seeing, and then realizing what I tell people, and how often it de-stresses parents, and seeing that people actually need that. So I think it's like informed it in some way, but also helped me to
Great.
understand how I can be more helpful to parents out there.
And based on your book and based on the work that you do, and I would say the impact is in my view very clear, that something like social media, like where you've had an impact on so many of at least people in my community's lives. What do you see for the world? What do you see for the world? Say people pick up your book and they really embody and take on a lot of the things that you're sharing. What's one of the bigger kind of visions that you have for humanity?
I really hope that we take some of this to heart, and I think at the end of the day, we look over history, usually the good rises to the top, and so I think that right now we're very much in a corporatized world that's kind of running things and has a blanket over a lot of people's
Oh,
eyes.
yeah.
But I think that at the same time, a lot more people are waking up. I think a lot more people are starting to realize it, because you can't hide something that's so obvious. You can't hide our health when you look around and you see the way that people are when they're walking around. You go to, a kids area, and you see all of the kids that have all sorts of conditions that's very obvious, then it just becomes obvious that there's a bigger problem. And then the first step, and I think this is where we need to go, at least for right now, is we're not going to change medicine. I mean, it will change slowly, it always does, but I think it has to change at the individual level.
Wow.
And that's what we need to do. I think parents need to realize how much ownership they have over their family's health, and then take control over that as much as they can. And I think that makes a huge difference. I think, I've seen it. The patients that come to my office are much healthier than the patients that were before that I had my office. It's a very big difference just from being health conscious. I'm not a magical doctor giving them, special pills or magical beans or something. They're just more health conscious. And I think that makes a lot of difference. And again, going back to, we didn't have these issues for the most part 50 years ago, or not at the same rate. So if you do make mindful decisions, and you eat healthier, and you get better fresh food, and you exercise a little bit more, that's all you need to do for most people, and they're going to be healthy. And I think that's encouraging. And I do feel encouraged that, younger generation of practitioners is going to be more open to this. I think medicine will change because it will have to. I don't think that doctors are bad people, and I think that it's going to take just a system wide change, and it can happen. Maybe it'll be that people will work together a little bit more. That's what I think. I think we just need to work together more. With different practitioners, holistic practitioners. I don't need to know everything about nutrition. I can work with a nutritionist. So I think that's a possibility for the future, but it's going to take, I think, a few more major wake up calls before things really change. Like COVID did, to some degree, wake some people up. I think it certainly shined a light on comorbidities and how health affects disease. But I still think that, especially within the medical community, there's still a long ways to go.
Yeah.
But when you're talking about a lot of the stuff that you talked about, even on social media, the social media discussion is definitely a lot more open now than it was a few years ago. There's still, you still gotta be careful what you say, for
Hmm.
sure. But it's definitely a much more open environment, and I feel much more comfortable saying some stuff, at least, and I still talk around a lot of things, but I don't feel as worried about getting shut down as we used to, because I think things have moved back the other way, which is good. So it's slow, but we're moving in a better direction, I think.
As I just yesterday, I cracked the back of my phone, so the insurance sent me a new one, and I can't log into Instagram right now. So I'm trying to figure out why I can't. I'm like, oh, did I do something wrong? I haven't figured. I thought I was playing pretty nice lately. What have you? I am interested in that. Have you faced like significant censorship over the years because of your perspectives?
A little bit. I mean,
You're
I've
pretty
been
good. You're
careful.
pretty good at communicating in
I've been
ways
pretty
that.
careful at skirting the line as best as I can to try to not say things that are super, the things that I know are going to get me shut down, or things I'm seeing other people. So it's been okay, but I mean, I think it's been self-censorship. That's the problem. I don't feel like I should have to do that. But I have been very mindful of the landmines that are out there, and so I've
Yeah.
tried to not put myself in a position where I'm going to get it shut down. But there are some things where I've had like, the little notices and things like that on it, but not too much, because I usually try to be indirect.
Yeah. You're really good at that.
Direct if you know what I'm talking about, but indirect in general, so you can't say that's what I'm talking about. And then it gets around its
What would you say, and you don't have to answer this question, but what would be one thing that you find yourself self-censoring on the most?
Oh, vaccines. I mean, everybody asks questions about vaccines, and if you had to mention anything about anything during coronavirus and really anything, even now, if you say anything that is even a question, just asking a basic question, then that could get you censored, because people will just write, oh, your hesitancy, whatever, right? And I think that it's not about pro or anti or anything. It's about having discussions, and again, we're trying to have healthy kids. We're trying to have a healthy population. As a pediatrician and a dad, I want to do and help people to get to the most resilient, healthy place. And I think that's what everybody wants. I think people just differ on how to get there. And it's unfortunate to me that the conversations are censored, and you can't actually
Right.
ask questions about ingredients, or let's see if anything could be safer, or is there something that we could change to decrease risks. It's not about like do it or don't do it. It's like, hey, could we have discussions about any medical product, and like, let's look at the ingredients and how do we make it better, work better, and be more safe. And
Right.
that's true of everything that we always do, but you can't really do that with some medical products these days, because it just gets shut down, I think.
A condition that one of my docs asked me recently, like, he was like, what do you think the most common condition we see is? And I like very reflexively said anxiety. And it's an interesting, and I think it's mostly like through the lens of the nervous system, as a pediatric chiropractor, it's like, that's my lens, and so if there's chronic stress in the nervous system, like I see it may not present as as an anxiousness that is debilitating every day, but I see it as a maybe persistent stress response. I'm curious with that particular subject, like anxiety in kids, which I see also on the rise. Is there anything in particular that you find helpful in your practice for parents that may be navigating this type of challenge?
Yeah, well, I would agree. I think, statistically speaking, whether it's the most diagnosed thing or not, I don't know. Probably a lot of kids have anxiety that maybe doesn't exactly rise to the level of being a disorder, or just not diagnosed, or they don't talk about it. But I think most kids are anxious. Like, everybody's anxious, everybody's stressed, and I think the big thing is reminding people about screens and social media. That's probably one of the biggest factors that are so problematic for everybody right now. I mean, again, mental health, it's a disaster. 50% of children at age, or I guess young adults at age 18, have a mental health diagnosis. 50%.
Wow.
1/3 of teen girls have thought about suicide.
Wow.
1/4 have a plan. 1 out of 10 have tried.
Wow, man.
That's insane. That is insane that under 18 years old, that teenagers, like 1 in 10 girls, are trying to commit suicide. Like, that is a massive problem, and there are many reasons for it, but I think one of the most easily modifiable ones is social media and screens. I think that nobody's really prepared for where social media went, and I'm not anti screens. I don't think the screen is the problem. I think it's number one, what are we not doing if we're on screens? And then number two, what are we actually doing on those screens? Because the average teenager now is on screens for 7 hours a day. That's a lot of hours in the day to be on screens, and that means you're not outside, you're not hanging out with friends, you're not exercising, you're not running around, you're not in nature. So that to me is the problem. Not doing homework. I mean, that's fine to me, I think. And it's not going to turn your brain to mush to watch a screen. It's just that if you're scrolling and you're comparing yourself to other people and comparing yourself to celebrities and comparing yourself to your friends who's on a vacation and looking at the people who are on a jet, and you're like, I don't have my own jet, so I'm not a good person. And, all these things. And then there's, the back and forth on social media and being excluded. It fosters anger. It fosters division. It fosters hate. And that's not a good thing to have every day consistently, but that is what's happening right now in adults and kids. But kids are, of course, much more susceptible to this stuff because they haven't lived as long and they haven't seen anything else or have more perspective. And so things like being shut out on social media or bullied or whatever, it can be even much more difficult for a young person to deal with those things. And we're just seeing that a lot.
What are you guys going to do with your kids with regard to screens?
I think in terms of at least phones and apps, it'll just be a phone without access to that stuff. So I think the big problem, and it's hard to guess what it's going to be like in 10 years, but right now the big problem that I see and I don't have a good answer for is that it's really hard to not be on something when everybody else is, because you are excluded from the group and how people communicate with each other as friends if you're not on it and everybody else is. And so that is a big problem, I think, but there still can be mindful ways around it. You can certainly limit it. And for kids that haven't gotten it yet, you can hold off as long as you possibly can. Or, if they must have social media, then maybe just limit it to their home computer, not on their phone, so they're not on it all day. Or 20 minutes a day or whatever. You can put limits on as a parent, and there are a lot of great phone companies and apps and other things that are starting up that I've definitely seen kind of ramping up lately for teens, where it's like special phone that only has certain access. So that to me is probably the way to go. I mean, it's probably not even a realistic thing to worry about for us. It'll probably be like AI little chip, whatever, like pulls up the phone. So it might be a totally different problem by then. But for right now, I think, I wouldn't give it to them. But if I had no choice because everybody else had it, then I think I would just get a phone that doesn't have all those capabilities, or certainly has the capability to be locked most of the time.
What would you say, maybe changing that question more practically in your practice? What are some of we talked about diabetes, we've talked about anxiety, but I think you did touch slightly on autism, but I'm curious, what are some of the trends that you see? And then what are some of the solutions based on the bigger priorities that you find in your patient base?
You mean trends in terms of where things are going?
Like what conditions you see that are becoming more chronic, becoming more prevalent, and then how are you finding
seriously, eczema, allergies, autism, autoimmune conditions, mental health, everything is higher. It's I mean, you just look at the statistics and their numbers are out of control. So all things are going in the wrong direction. And that's why I think we need to stand up and say, like, this is bad. This is not a good thing. Like, this is not where we want to be going, to the point where our life expectancy is going down. That is not what we should be doing. I mean, that's never been the case before. So there is a lot that we're doing differently and wrong or out of balance that we weren't doing before. So let's take the good, again, we're not dying at 40. So we do have a lot of good that we've learned over the years. So let's take that. Let's not get rid of that, but let's go back a little bit and say, okay, well, we need to get back down to basics. We need more good food, local food. We got to get rid of the chemicals and processed food. We got to cook more. We have to exercise more, and exercise cannot be what you hate to do. It's got to be built into your lifestyle. So you're going to be walking more. I mean, look at the blue zones, right? It's like, what do they do? They're not like going to the gym. They're it's the great grandmother that's 105 years old, that has bigger muscles than me, that's in the kitchen like rolling and working hard because
Hmm.
that's what she wants to do. And the other people working on farms or walking up and down hills, like you have to have that built into your life. So you're just exercising every day. And that might mean here, it doesn't necessarily mean you have to go walk up and down hills every day, but maybe instead of driving all the way to school, you drop your kids off a couple blocks and you walk, or, whatever it is that you can do to build in exercise that's just part of your day, then that's what's going to make a difference. It's not a diet. It's not a thing that you need to do. You have to build your life around it. And then you're just going to be healthy. Like people didn't think about this. I don't think that much 100 years ago. They just lived. They just went to work. They worked hard. It was exercise. They went to school. They had phys ed. They moved around more. Like, kids are just sitting. So we have some big societal changes, but again, from a family perspective, focus on what you have control over and just think about those basic foundations. It doesn't have to be stressful, hard, or overwhelming. Just choose little things here and there and just one thing at a time. Focus on health.
The Could you review with our audience the seeds of health again?
Yeah. So stress, environment and toxins, exercise, diet, and sleep.
Gotcha. Of the five, we talked about food and we talked about toxins. I'm curious, what pops out the most in your practice as far as like what you find yourself recommending the most, or is it pretty much broadly?
I think it's food and toxins in terms of
Yeah,
what I talk
gotcha.
about the most, because to me, those are the things that have the most bang for your buck. And I don't care who it is. Even if the parents know, then oftentimes it's still good to talk about it because it's a reminder, or, the parents like, see, it's not just me. The doctor say that. And
Good
it's
point.
important to emphasize this
Mhm.
because we have to build a generation of kids that understands that food doesn't come wrapped in plastic to a grocery store. Like they have to know what it is and where it comes from, and they have to understand that that is the foundation of their health. And if we give over our power and food to big companies and there isn't any more fresh food, then we're going to be in trouble. Like we see what's happening with the food as it is. And the only way that we're going to have any chance to be healthy or anything that looks like it does today is we're going to have to push back to bring back a lot more local food. It doesn't mean you can't have processed and packaged food. It doesn't mean you can't have things that are mass produced. It just can't be the majority of what we're eating.
Mhm.
It has to be the minority. And we need to figure out a way to, you have to make your own garden. Maybe there needs to be local community gardens. Maybe grocery stores have to make some of their own food on the roof. I don't know. There are things that we can do. It's possible. You can grow food anywhere now, pretty much. So I think it is doable, and we would just need to prioritize it. And if we do as a society prioritize it one family at a time, the companies will do it. They're not going to sell things you don't buy. So if we prioritize that and we stop buying all the crap, then they'll stop making it.
Both being in California, I've been very immersed in this whole, medical freedom fiasco, or maybe the opposite. I'm curious what you tell your patients with regard to school. Like, how do you advise them in the state of California where they largely don't really have a choice?
Yeah, it's just being honest. There are rules that exist in different places, and so these are discussions that we have. And for me personally, I don't force anybody to do anything. We have
Hmm.
discussions around any sort of topic, and then people can make their own decisions. But I'm not the state, and I'm not the school, and they have their own rules, and so informing people of what the rules are and what those decisions entail is really the discussion that we have. And some people choose to homeschool, other people choose to move, and other people choose to do what they need to do to go to school. So it really depends on the family and their convictions and what they believe or don't believe. And some people are much more strongly willing to get different medical interventions, right? So I think that it just depends, but the rules are the rules, and there's not
Yeah.
really, especially in California, there's not a lot of wiggle room there because things go through public health.
A family does choose to get fully vaccinated. How do you support them from a environmental toxin and a detox perspective?
So we have a bunch of different herbs and supplements and other things. It just, first of all, detoxification in general, the most important things are the basic things that our body does. How do you get stuff out?
Mhm.
You poop, you pee, you sweat. So first thing that you want to make sure for your kids, regardless of anything, is make sure they're drinking a ton. of liquid. So that way they're peeing more. Make sure that you're supporting their going to the bathroom. So lots of fiber. If you want to add in some magnesium, that can be, great too around that time. And then sweating, moving if they're older kids, then getting outside in the sun. Those things help your natural detoxification. And then, there's a lot of supplements and herbs out there that can support detoxification, can support the liver, can support your antioxidant efforts, and are known to kind of pull out metals and things like that. So you can try any of those things, whether they work or not. I don't know. Who knows, right? I think they probably do, but there's not, we don't have research on that stuff, right? We should have very definitive research on, X and Y does, this, but we don't have that. So usually I just go with common sense and things that support the body, support detoxification, and unlikely to cause any negative, side effects with the supplement. It's possible, but it's unlikely, but it probably helps. So I offer it to our patients, and if they want to do it, they do it.
What is, I know you gave us one earlier, reading food labels or reading labels that, we're going to expose our kids to at all. What's another thing that you would move our audience with, in terms of like taking action?
Yeah. So reading labels, thinking about all the toxins in products. So if you're buying things for your home, for your skin, sunscreen, any of that stuff, I think that's super important. Again, it goes back to reading labels, but being mindful for all products. Screen time, we talked about that a little bit. So really trying to be mindful and decreasing screen time, especially if your family is on screens a lot. And then movement. I think building your life around movement is key. If it means getting your kid into athletics or whatever, that's great. But if it just means that we're going to take the stairs more, that we're going to walk a little more to school, that we're, whatever it is, just build that in, and then try to build in on your, free family time, whatever that's like, go into nature, go for hikes, especially if you live in a big city, get out the city, go into the forest, walk around, go to a waterfall, go to the beach, whatever it is, just spend as much time as you can doing other stuff. So that way you can get some balance from city life.
That's awesome. I mean, where in LA are you? I grew up in LA.
I'm right now in like La Cañada, Flint Ridge area. So
Gotcha. And how did you come to LA from Toronto?
The weather.
Oh.
So I did med school in Philadelphia, and then I had visited some of my family in Brazil, and I was like, oh, this is so nice. Like, I'm just used to the winter, and then I was like, oh, I should probably apply to some warm places, and I ended up getting residency in LA, and then ended up staying.
That's awesome, man. How does our audience stay in touch with you?
So the best ways would be, so you can go to Instagram at Dr. Joel Gator, or you can go to the book website, parenting@yourchildspace.com. You can get that on anywhere, or you can go to the website for the book. And if you do pre-order the book, my email's on there. You can email me, and I will send you the first chapter, since it's a pre-order, so I'll send it to you now. A bonus chapter, and a free 1 month access to the VIP community for our parents. So a lot of people have questions. They have questions about shots. They have questions about natural parenting. They have questions about whatever, whether it's in the book or anything else. And it's a good community where you can ask questions of their parents or me, and chat, so that you get 1 month free access if you order.
That's awesome, man. It is not lost on me that you risk a lot. You risk a lot taking the perspectives that you do. And I appreciate the common sense nature. I appreciate the critical thinking. I appreciate the humility and the groundedness of how you operate. And honestly, I'm just glad to have another dad and a doc in the trench with me. And in the end, I'm just so grateful for what you shared with us today. Is there anything that you would love to close with?
I think the one thing that I love to close with is just reminding parents that even though there's a lot of stressful things out there, parenting is something that's innate to us, and we can do it. And I, fully believe that you can do it, and you got it. So just, take it in, enjoy it as it comes. And yes, there are some things to be mindful of, but you don't need to be overly stressed. There's a lot of stressful things out there, but shut off the news and just live your happy life.
And if you're able to do that in LA, then anyone can do it anywhere else, right? Oh, it's awesome, man. I appreciate you so much. I'm very grateful for what you shared with us today. And I know for a fact that it's going to just give people a breath of fresh air, because it is literally the number one question that I get is, where do you find a good pediatrician? Do you know any good pediatricians? And it's a very simple redirect to send them your way. And so all the links for the book, for your website, for Instagram, for the community are going to be on our show notes. Everybody, please take advantage of that. Dr. Joel has been a beacon for really, really great pediatric medicine, integrative, holistic perspectives, and a lot of critical thinking and telling the truth. I really appreciate you sharing with us.
Thanks so much.
As you probably know, I'm the clinic director of the Future Generations Clinic of Chiropractic. I wanted to invite those of you in the greater San Diego area to come check us out. We expect and experience miracles in our office every day and would love for you to experience the same, as well as your family, especially your kids. This month, we're offering our new patient package for just $67 for podcast listeners. The offer retails at $349 and includes an in-depth consultation where our patients literally tell us we know more about their family's health in the first 15 minutes than virtually every doctor on their healthcare team combined. Our state-of-the-art clinical workup, including Insight nervous system scans, full spine digital x-rays, and a functional exam. We also include a full report of your results, a customized plan to realize your greatest health potential, as well as your first adjustment in our office. Check out the link in the show notes for all the details and claim the offer. Love and appreciate you all.